and welcome to the Postmodern Art Podcast, the podcast dedicated to giving artists who are wowing the world over the platform they deserve. I'm your host, Nathan Ragland, and for today's episode, throw on your ski mask and sneak on in as we heist one hell of a conversation for you guys today. Today's guests are Daniel Pomidor and Bobby Matsudaira, the dynamic duo leading the charge on the award-winning indie game Keepsake County, a Midwestern Stealth Game. I became aware of these two and Keepsake County whenever I first encountered them at MomoCon earlier this year, and honestly, just watching the demo alone had me excited and curious. That's why I definitely wanted to have them here to talk about this game, talk about their partnership and all the things behind it, and what I believe is a fantastic conversation that I know you guys are going to absolutely love. If you enjoyed Daniel and Bobby, please make sure you support them in the links down in the description below. Trust me, any love and support for them and for this game in general is absolutely loved and appreciated. If you enjoy the podcast, make sure you like, share, subscribe, or follow whatever audio streaming platform you prefer. Leave 5 stars wherever you can. You know I see that stuff and you know it genuinely warms my heart. In fact, speaking of subscribe, I'm currently on the hunt right now to see if I can get 2,500 subscribers by the end of the year 2024. So, if you guys have not subscribed just yet, I highly recommend you do, because if we hit that goal, I will be getting a tattoo as voted on by the community. As in, the community recommends me what to get, the community votes on what I get, and the community gets to see what exactly I get tattooed onto my body. So if you want to have an opportunity to have something fun or something sincere tattooed onto me, I recommend you subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you want to go a little further with that support, may I recommend you check out the merch shop that we have on fourthwall.com with the link to that in the description below. We have some fantastic merch done by some outstanding artists, and we might be having some more soon. Hint, hint, wink, wink. But now, without further ado, please enjoy the Postmodern Art Podcast. I'll say I'm still thinking back to MomoCon when I was seeing the demo that you guys were showcasing or whatnot like that. I still can't stop thinking about it. It just looks that good and that fun.
Yeah, it's been nice seeing it like out in the wild. You know, you work on something for this long of a period of time, and it's kind of like, you know what your reaction is, and you know what you anticipate from a piece like this. But then getting to see people actually sit down with it, and hit those same, like, they found the thing that we wanted them to find, or they're using that item the way we designed it. It's been nice to kind of take it on the road a bit.
That's good. As someone that works in kind of this space of like entertaining an audience, to see an audience really latch onto it and really like enjoy what you're presenting or whatnot has to be very rewarding.
Yeah.
Well, absolutely, for sure.
Especially just when you've been working on it for a really long time, you know.
I can only imagine the stories you guys have when it comes to the development of this beauty. All right, guys, before we really get going, I must ask the icebreaker question of the podcast, if I may. Let's say you guys get to go to a desert island on your own accord. It is just you, alone with your thoughts. You get to kick back, relax, breathe, get to truly enjoy yourselves for a little bit. With accommodations, you're not stranded on a desert island or what. It's like a little personal B&B paradise away from society for a little bit. To make sure that you guys don't go completely insane on this island, you could bring one piece of media or one piece of art with you to help with whatever kind of headspace you want on this island. If given this opportunity, what would that one piece be?
One piece of media.
If I was going to be particularly lazy and just assume I have an internet connection, I would probably take Team Fortress 2.
Okay. No, honestly, it's a very good, very valid one, especially with the community that's behind it more than anything else.
Well, and it's got enough variety that I'm not going to get bored.
Okay.
It's also not depressing.
That's valid. I was going to say, is that part of the reason why you instantly latch onto that, or is there like a reason why that's the first thing that comes to mind?
I mean, I have 2,000 something hours in it, so I've played way too much of that game. So, I've been playing it a little bit recently, I guess. So that's why it comes to mind. But yeah, I think just as far as like a endlessly replayable piece of media or, rewatchable. My other thought was like True Detective, and I was like, that would be too depressing for isolation.
Yeah, no joke.
Yeah.
But I was going to say,
Yeah.
wow, the video game designer having thousands of hours in video games and such. How surprising. No, I'm joking. I'm sorry. That was just a little, the thought that randomly came to my head. But Bobby, what about yourself? What would you be bringing to this island?
Well, you opened it up to just media in general.
Yes,
and
I did.
I'm a little bit more prepared when it's like, what's your favorite movie or like a video game that you had but like all media, I mean, and we're not trapped here. This isn't like a you're here forever thing. This is just if you're alone by yourself for a while and you have one thing to set the kind of like a relaxing space. I don't know. I mean, this might be a little bit of a basic answer, but that show The Office is really long and there's some great character moments and it's a feel-good thing, and I could probably rewatch that and be in a good space. I think as far as like TV shows though, I don't know, Twin Peaks was warring for first place, but I think that Office is just a little bit more feel-good.
That is true. And you say it's a basic answer, but I don't recall anyone ever using The Office as an answer for this question. So,
well, I feel like it's like a weirdly underrated. I mean, it's like overrated in some ways and underrated in others.
It's so basic it surprises me actually coming from you.
Yeah, I think that it's like one of those shows that I don't watch very often. I don't know. Wait. Oh no. Now I'm like thinking through my. You know what? I might do like.
Over the Garden Wall.
No, I might do like the Twilight Zone.
Ooh.
Or like the Andy Griffith Show.
That was pretty good.
Yeah.
I mean, any of those shows are good.
All right, no, I'm gonna screw this all up. I'm screwing this all up. And I'm gonna drop a way more simple answer that's just one movie. I'm gonna do Duck Soup.
Duck Soup. Okay.
I'm gonna do the Marx Brothers movie Duck Soup.
Okay. Is there a particular reason why that's the one you're dropping?
I've watched that movie probably more times in my life than any other movie. It's just like I was raised without any television really, so it was a lot of old black and white comedies, and that movie in particular was just it's a really simple witty old black and white like slapstick screwball comedy that like at any point in my life, stressed, having a good time, feeling low, feeling up, doesn't matter, that movie has always centered me to like where I need to be at kind of neutral. Groucho Marx does that to me.
I mean, too, like you said, it's Groucho Marx. It's a comedy classic for a reason. So, like, I don't doubt, obviously, the credibility. I used to love seeing all sorts of like Marx Brothers stuff. So, like, I totally get exactly where you're coming from. That was my bread and butter growing up. Was all the old Marx Brothers movies. Well, in that case, you were raised well. But regardless, Team Fortress 2 and Duck Soup. Those are your answers. You're locking that in. I'm locking that in, baby. Yeah. Then if that's the case, I cannot think of a better way to start the Postmodern Art Podcast. Welcome, everyone. I am your host, Nathan Ragland. Feel free to like, share, subscribe, or follow whatever audio streaming platform you prefer. Leave 5 stars wherever you can. You know, I see that stuff. You know, it genuinely warms my heart. And follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky, and TikTok at PostmodArtPod for future updates and guest announcements, including today's guests. They are the duo leading the charge on the award-winning indie game, Keepsake County, a Midwestern Stealth Game. Welcome to the podcast from Forward Instinct and Lone Pine Media, respectfully, Daniel Pomidor and Bobby Matsudaira. Yeah. Yeah, you were real close. You were so it was quick. It's got the Matsudaira. You went real so Italian close with it. Matsudaira. Even that's Matsudaira. Yeah. Even though I wrote it out, I saw the A, and for some reason, that's how I went. Yeah, became an E. No, I haven't heard that pronunciation of it before, so I might just switch it to that from now on. Yes, I am an influence. How are you both doing today?
Doing all
Peachy
right.
keen, Daddy-o.
That's good to hear. That's fantastic to hear. Thank you both sincerely for taking the time to do this. I know whenever I first became aware of what you guys were presenting with Keepsake County alone, I was instantly blown away by it thanks to that fantastic demo that I saw at MomoCon, which, again, wonderful opportunity to meet you guys. It was great for you guys to really get the word out there, and I cannot wait to talk about what you guys are going to be presenting with this because just that little taste has me excited to know more about Keepsake County and everything you guys are doing. But before we really start on that, I want to go back just a little bit and learn more or less the origin story of Daniel and Bobby, respectfully. What got you guys interested in art, animation, video games? What got you interested in that kind of stuff in the first place? Whoever wants to go first, feel free.
I'll let you take this first, Dan.
Okay. All right. Well, shoot. I mean, do you want to how Bobby and I met, or how we started making stuff? I guess.
I want to go even further back from that. I want to learn like what got you guys individually interested in like the arts of any sorts in the first place. Like I said, arts, animation, video game. What got you interested in that field? Going, first off.
I mean, for me, probably like comic books, to be honest.
Okay.
Growing up, yeah. I would like go to the thrift store and get comic books that they had in like the bargain rack, and that was pretty much where I started. Yeah.
Was there any particular comics that like grabbed your attention immediately? Like you saw that and you're like, I need to have every copy possible.
Oh God, Ninja Turtles and Sonic and like Spider-Man were kind of the three that I went for when I was like 7 years old. Yeah.
I mean, they're iconic for a reason. Plus, I don't think I've heard many people talking about like the Ninja Turtle comics, like when those were a thing. Like that's something else. That's a deep cut right there.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean the ones that I had weren't like the like original, like run. They were the ones from like I think like the later '90s, like
Okay.
early 2000s, when they had, sold out or whatever you want to call it. But yeah, it was a lot more like campy adventure stuff. But yeah, nonetheless, definitely an influence.
That's fair. That's valid. Now, I'm also curious as well. When did video games become like more or less a part of your life?
I mean, I'm like the youngest, so my brother had like a Game Boy.
Okay.
And he was playing like Super Mario Brothers Deluxe, and that was I think my first exposure to video games. And then, kind of from there, like my dad was like a game modder for a while. He did Battlezone Forgotten Enemies was like a really big one he worked on.
Okay.
And I don't know, N64. I'm trying to think of what else from like that like really early era, but that's really kind of it for me. Was that stuff that like kind of got me into games.
That's incredible to hear, especially like that early, like at that time or whatnot, being being around like a video game modder when before that was really like a thing at the time. So like,
yeah,
that's insane to hear.
Yeah, like really early PC gaming community type stuff. Yeah.
That's insane. What about you, Bobby? What got you interested in the arts and animation and video games in the first place?
Well, when I was growing up, like I said, we didn't have any like television channels or any cable or anything like that. So it was pretty much just old VHS tapes.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember being really young, maybe 3, 4, something like that, and seeing King Kong,
Okay.
the 30s version. And I remember being fascinated with like, oh, that's like it's like a stop motion. It's this blending of animation and live action, this kind of mixed media, and not in like a cartoon for kids, but using the medium of animation to tell a character-driven story that wasn't just using animation, kind of relating it to children. Going from there and seeing the other like Harryhausen stuff, like Jason the Argonauts. I remember I used to go up to the VCR and I would like push pause play just to see the frames and like what they were actually doing. And this is like elementary school, and I had one of those old those tracing tables, where you turn on the light and it's like for kids to like trace drawings. I remember I drew a picture of a guy, and I just watched like Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, so it was all about like Wolfman and stuff, the Universal monsters. And I remember I drew a picture of a guy, and then I put another piece of paper over it and drew a picture of the exact same guy, but he had like a werewolf face. And I put them on top of each other, and I realized that if I turned the light off, you saw the guy, and when you turn the light on, he turns into a werewolf. And as a kid, I used to make these little, like, almost 2-frame animations without realizing that's what I was doing. It was just kind
Right.
of a little thing I would do on my own. Um, and that really developed. I've been doing animation and illustration, short film stuff, since I was like 4 or 5, doing like Lego stop motion stuff.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. As far as video games go, I didn't really have a console until way late in the game.
Okay.
I was I would watch my grandparents and aunts and uncles play on the computer, and so like my first couple of games were like Age of Empires and Myst and like those early '90s games. And it wasn't until I remember I used to go yard sailing a lot, and I found this copy of Morrowind um, when I was like maybe 12 or so.
Hmm.
And I remember Morrowind being the first time I played a game where it kind of opened my mind to the more cinematic potential of storytelling.
Right.
And from there, it was just kind of like, okay, then you go to like your Oblivion, Fallout 3, then you go into your BioShocks and you get in
Hmm.
your thing. You're like, okay, all right, now I'm rolling in there. That was kind of the thing. I never really thought I was going to be working on video games necessarily. I just kind of love making things. So
Okay.
anything that features an ability to kind of like tell stories about characters, I'll latch on to. So when I saw what Forward Instinct was doing um, with like Midnight Ultra and actually completing projects and everything, I was like, whatever I can do to help um, kind of dive into that and see how I could feed into it.
Okay, okay, that's honestly a like it's amazing that kind of progress from like being exposed to like certain things to like getting that first little taste, especially when it comes to the video game realm. To here
Yeah.
you are like helping out with telling a unique kind of story in several ways possible, especially what you
Mhm.
guys are going to be doing. Um, Stepping back just a little bit, I'm curious for each of you guys, when did it go from just kind of this general love and appreciation, like being first exposed to that kind of stuff and loving the arts in one way or another, to a passion and truly wanting to make it like your career?
I think for me it was kind of always there.
Okay.
Like I said, I started really young, being interested in making movies, in kind of making story driven pieces as a really little kid. I remember like writing screenplays in, I guess it was third grade, for like, I'm gonna shoot this movie with all my friends. I'm like, however old I was at the time. Um, and I remember just always kind of, I think my dad plays music, and he's made a quite a few number of like albums over the years. So seeing him growing up, like playing the guitar and going to the recording studio and like laying down a few tracks or whatever, kind of immediately gave me the idea that um, it's something you can do way further down the line in your life. Like, it's not like a hobby you do as a kid if you don't want it to be. So for me, it was kind of, the door was always open to pursue that. Um, I've never really, yeah, I guess I'm a little bit odd in that, yeah, I've never not known I wanted to do this.
That's valid. That's fair. I mean, especially like you were talking about kind of that amazement with how they did in like the classic films and like the
Yeah.
little illustrations beforehand you talk about. I can kind of see how that thing is just kind of always, that desire is always there and just never
Mhm.
really left. Like you always knew it was gonna be, it was this or nothing. um
Mhm.
and what about
Yeah.
you? Sorry. So,
I said, yeah, it is. It's this or nothing. So hopefully it's this.
yeah, I'd like to hope so too. Daniel, what about yourself? When did it go from this kind of just general love and appreciation to a passion and wanting to make it your career?
I mean, for me, like I've tried a lot of different stuff.
Okay.
I was trying to do comics when I went to SCAD, but I'd always had an interest in games, and games are, I think, for a lot of kind of the average like layperson on the outside looking in, it's gotten a lot better, but there's really a time where it's kind of this like black box
Yep.
where it's like you don't know anybody who's in games, you don't know how to make games, you don't know how coding works, you don't know how to get visuals moving on screen or anything like that. And so it's just kind of this like mysterious thing. And for me as a kid, I was like a really big fan of Edmund McMillan, and his games growing up, like his Flash games, so like Meat Boy and like Spewer and Time Fuck. You're probably gonna have to censor that, but
Look, we're already way past the first minute. I don't censor this thing. If you want to say it, fuck, go for it.
Okay, yeah. Well, so he, what he does is, I mean, he also made Gish. He made Triachnid. I'm trying to think of like some of his other stuff. I mean, Ether is one of the like really well known ones. But you know, before he like did Binding of Isaac and Super Meat Boy, he was just doing all of these very like well made, like fun to play games. But they always had this kind of like layer of, I guess, like emotionality to them and kind of like autobiography in a way. And so, you know, playing those was like cool, but then he released this this like demo disc called This Is a Cry for Help. And I remember being like a teenager, I think, when that came out and getting a copy, and it had like all of his games on it. It had tons of like sketches and concept art. It had like all of his like web comics growing up and like his comics from like when he was a child and stuff. And it just kind of like his entire like sketchbook just like dumped onto a disc, and it's like, hey, here, like take a look at this. This is how making games like works. Like this is where I start and how everything kind of goes. And so for me, it was like, oh, like you can, like this is something that like I can do. And so from there, you know, I don't think it was really until I was at college and I was like really trying to make a go of making games, but that I think is probably one of the first steps in my journey as far as like, oh, like this is a thing that you can do, not just a thing you can play.
Right. I mean, it's always amazing kind of having that like exposure to like what the layers underneath that really like opens your eyes more than anything else. That's something I hope to do with this podcast sometimes, really give that people kind of that look behind some of their favorites or people they may not know about, and just showcase to some of them not only the incredible stuff they're doing, but inspire some people to be like, okay, well, if this is how they're doing it, let me see if I could do a similar path, or let me see what steps I can take to try to go down that path very similar. So like hearing that demo disc was a real big step to being the developer you are today. I mean, once again, I can't help but applaud. It's a good inspiration more than anything else.
Yeah, and I would say like, you know, some of the like Valve developer commentaries were a really big deal growing up too, and I don't know if you've ever heard of 30 Flights of Loving.
I don't think I've ever had, no.
Okay, it I think it got like some IGF buzz or like, you know, Indiecade buzz or something like way back in the day, but it was kind of like this like short 30-minute sort of like art house Pulp Fiction-y type of narrative game. Okay. Like it's sort of a walking sim, but I mean, it pretty much is a walking sim, to be honest, but it got a lot of buzz when it came out. And I just remember like playing it because it was so like visual. And then Brendan Chung, the guy who made it, he did probably his most well-known game is Quadrilateral Cowboy, which is this really great hacking game. And he's doing Skin Deep right now with Devolver, but yeah, he had a developer commentary in that too, where he kind of peels back the layers, and he's literally like, oh yeah, like this is how I, you know, design the level, and like, you know, I'm turning these things on and off, and like you walk up and like trigger this thing to do this. And again, just seeing somebody kind of like explode open how they actually make something so that you can think about it and then start reframing it in like artistic terms was also like a really big deal.
I mean, I can only imagine, especially for something that seemingly, I guess, influential, I guess, or like you're saying, kind of that little like peer behind or whatnot, hearing that commentary, it makes sense, honestly, especially with some of the games that I've been able to see Forward Instinct produce as well, which for a little bit, I want to actually divulge into that a little bit. Some of the stuff you guys actually developed and put out there to the world are really unique concepts that I never would have really thought about, or some really unique, like either visuals or storytelling behind. Like I could really tell that there's a lot of intrigue and love that goes behind some of the things that you guys are doing. Like, what were some of the first concepts or the first influences that you want to bring to a game, if I may ask?
Yeah, I guess that's going to be more me than Bobby. Yeah, so are you talking about just like in general when I make a game, or like something specific?
I mean, there's a couple I do want to highlight, but like let's start just in general. Like how does a concept, or how do you want to, I'm trying to figure out how the best way to word it. Words are wonderful right now.
Like what it seems like, I mean, we have a real, like Forward Instinct has a definite kind of style and direction. And when I was seeing what Dan was producing with the team, you know, it was like I could see the influences, and I could also see a very clear kind of vision being separated from that. And I think that, like, Dan, you definitely have a place where you start from, that like all of your ideas kind of inhabit a very similar kind of origin point of taste. And I think that like that's kind of what
I wanted to make sure I wasn't being asked about something specific first, I guess. So I mean, when I'm just like guy making game, like I have a game idea or something, usually I start with like, I think visuals, and then I kind of try to get into like the mindset of what it's supposed to be. I think initially I kind of started with some gameplay concepts of like, this is, like this interesting mechanic I'm gonna screw around with. And sometimes that's the case, but usually I kind of like create the world first, and then I kind of work backwards from there, of it being like, to me, it's very important to, whenever you're playing something, to kind of feel like you are like there and like present. So whenever I create something, I'm really focused on like the art style and like, okay, how should this place like feel to walk around in? Like, what should it look like? What does it sound like? Like, what kind of like headspace do you get transported to whenever you start playing something? So, all our games have a very different sense of that, and a lot of my kind of influences, wind up being a little bit biographical in one way or another, and musical. And I'll when I start a project, if I'm like really going at it and like I feel really confident about it, I'll have like a Pinterest board of like 1,000 something, like just like pictures and like visual influences and stuff, and I'm just like, oh hey, I'm gonna break down like all the different kinds of belts that people in this world wear. Like, I'm like kind of obsessively meticulous about it, to be honest. So that's kind of where I start.
I mean, I can truly get a sense of kind of the unique worlds that you kind of more or less play around with. Like, for example, one of the games I wanted to bring up real quickly is Midnight Ultra that you guys develop or whatnot. Though, like, just from the little bit I've been able to see of it, the world alone, or at least like the feeling, the vibe you're trying to go for that one, is something that looks like truly unique that I've only seen in like maybe a handful of games. For some reason, Cruelty Squad is like one of the first games I think of with that. I don't know if I'm the first person to make that comparison, or if that's the direct comparison.
Well, it's a flattering comparison. It's like Midnight Ultra is kind of funny because I have so many like complicated feelings about Midnight Ultra, I guess, because I mean, the first ideas for it kind of actually came to me as I was like graduating college, and I was really into like Queens of the Stone Age at the time, and then I wound up moving west, and so I am literally driving through like the desert and stuff on the way to Los Angeles, and then I get to Los Angeles, and my initial experience there was that I was living in this like very cramped, very dim studio apartment in like an alley. Like, the outside of my window is just like razor wire, and like
very warming, very housewarming.
Yeah, it's just like a really like kind of depressing place, to be honest. Very dim and kind of like dirty and stuff. And so, my headspace was kind of in like a lot of that game, and a lot of the road trip. I was like taking pictures of things and stuff, and that snuck its way into the game. Like, you start out in like Fort Stockton, and like a lot of that was just like me going through Fort Stockton and be like, wow, I really don't like this place. I'm gonna put it in a game because it's so memorable. But that was like 2017, and kind of the landscape, I think, of Steam and indie games changed a lot since then. I mean, I worked on probably like all of the actual mechanics for that game in about a month after SCAD, after I graduated college, and because I just had nothing to do and I was job hunting and I was just like living at home, and I was just like, well, I'm gonna bash something out. I'm not gonna like sit here and do nothing. And so so I got the visual style going. I got like most of the enemies and like weapons and stuff kind of working, and like just the general feel of the game. I didn't have any levels or anything, and then wound up getting a job, wound up moving to California, and then I had it just kind of sitting in the back burner, and we were like working on this other game project that will see the light of day one day. But we were like, okay, this is really tiring. Let's go like just like jam something out and finish something and get it on Steam because we don't want our first game to be this like long, perpetually worked on thing that then kind of like dies on arrival because we don't know what we're doing. And so I was like, okay, so I was like, well, I have this, prototype just sitting on my computer that looks like this and, everything. And everyone's like, okay, sure. Like, let's, go work on this together. And so we basically spent maybe another month actually finishing the version that initially went onto Steam.
Okay.
And that was 2017 was when we actually put that out. And I remember, there's kind of just nothing that looked like it when it came out. And it was our first game, so it was kind of like messy and like buggy and, all sorts of things. And I think people were expecting a lot more, like a really long game or something, even though it was like $3, but yeah, it was this funny, like, moment of like people would like buy the game knowing what it looked like and like watching the trailer and then being like, I'm very mad that this game is pink and hard to look at. It's like, what? But like you knew what it looked like. Like why'd you do that? I mean, there's a lot of stuff to not like besides the visuals, but
right.
But yeah, so it kind of wound up being this like weird punky thing, and it got like this surprise rock paper shotgun write up, and because of how it I think landed when it first came out, I was very like conflicted because I was like, this is going to drive more attention to something that like I'm not super happy with, but like also that's not so bad because like rock paper shotgun is saying like it sounds like the the awful sex room in the back of Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me, which was a huge compliment to our
and caught my
composer.
attention.
Yeah. And this is before Bobby joined, and so
Okay.
and so it was like cool to have that, and then we wound up doing like a little DLC for it and putting it out for free just to kind of try and clean the game up some, but yeah, there's just really like nothing that looked like it on Steam at the time, and just kind of like in games in general at the time, it was kind of weird. Is like intentionally very abrasive and kind of nasty to experience, like on purpose. And so then you had stuff like Post Void coming out. You had I think around the same time was when what is the New Blood interactive game that's like also Dusk. Yeah. Like that was around the same era. I don't really know who came first, and it doesn't really matter because they're wildly successful. But like, yeah, Post Void, Cruelty Squad, a lot of stuff where it's like, I don't know if any of those guys ever saw Midnight Ultra or like played it or like what they thought of it, but it is kind of funny to be part of that like lineage of like intentionally ugly, abrasive, kind of like janky, interesting games, and it's nice to be part of, even if it wasn't like the perfect reception. Yeah, there's somewhere else I was going with Midnight Ultra there, but I don't quite remember.
Well, it's y'all's first thing, right?
Yeah,
Midnight Ultra was the first thing, and it's like the first thing you do is always gonna be like
a little rough around the edges.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
If you're lucky. It's almost like if you get really lucky, it hits and it's great. But there's like the other side to it where it's like, well, now all of your failures are past your success. Like you're going to have those same structural failures. There's going to be things you haven't learned yet that you're going to need to. I would rather learn those things at the beginning and build up to something rather than hit it big and then find out all the ways I wasn't ready to hit it that quickly. So I think like starting with a game like Midnight Ultra, where you can clearly see the lineage, well, not just in the lineage you were describing, where you're kind of part of this aesthetic questioning movement in games, but also the lineage into Keepsake County with especially the environments and the palettes. And it's kind of like watching a filmmaker. You watch all of their movies and you can see their earliest movies. You're like, oh, I can see in Eraserhead how he got to Mulholland Drive, because he made that one first. And Midnight Ultra, I think, has that very clear growth.
Yeah. I do have a funny story about Midnight Ultra. So I did not go to GDC for the first time until last year. So I have been kind of on the outside looking in as far as like game devs go. But my friend Zach, who did like concept art for Midnight Ultra and like some of the texture work and stuff, he was on the team at the time, and he had done all this work for it. And we actually have like an art book now of like a lot of his work and stuff. That's pretty cool. But he went to GDC, I believe it was GDC, and so he's like walking around there looking for concept art jobs and everything because none of us were working on that game full time,
Right.
and so he's poking around, he's looking for concept art jobs, he's networking, he's talking to people, and I just remember he was talking to somebody from like I think like 343 or something. He's like, oh, like I do concept art, and they're like, yeah, and they're like, well, what game do you work on? And he was like, Midnight Ultra, and they're like, Midnight Ultra. What is that? And then they went and they Googled it, and he said what he saw was that they were just looking at their phone and they opened the search page for it, and their face just lit up pink from the screenshots, and they were like, oh, this game. Yeah, and to me, like Midnight Ultra, like for all of the, like me boohooing about it, one of the great lessons that I really learned about that game and have taken forward is that it's so, so, so important. I think more than almost anything else is to have an extremely distinct and iconic art style.
Yeah.
Like, don't be afraid to be bold and stand out in a lineup, because you take that game and you put it next to all the other boomer shooters, of that period or even of now, and it still stands out in a lineup. You're just like, what the hell is that pink thing? So
What the hell is that pink thing? Me looking at an episode of SpongeBob. Anyways, no. I was gonna say, like, speaking of being bold, another game that I want to just bring up real quickly or whatnot is another one that's has a unique world, considering the fact that world is partially the real world. Is it with daemon, however you pronounce the name of that game?
Yeah. Yeah, oh boy.
I was gonna say that.
Yeah.
It looks like at least a unique concept. So I'm curious on how that game and that concept came to be.
Was that technically the first thing we worked on together?
I think so. Yeah. So, I mean, do you want to talk about your involvement with that before I spiel?
Oh, I mean, it was pretty much your rodeo. But yeah, I mean, we back in college, there was a game called HVZ that was pretty popular at the time among a lot of different colleges.
Okay. Humans versus Zombies.
Okay.
Humans versus Zombies, and it was basically a more complicated version of tag with Nerf guns.
Okay.
And our school, being an art school, went really over the top with costumes and stories and props, and it was this big 5-day event, and we got a couple of hundred players.
Oh wow!
And it was this big deal. It's how a lot of us met and became friends. But Dan, being in the game design mind and kind of pushing these kind of technological innovations, especially around that time, came up with an idea that was a bit more complicated. It was a really good idea, and that turned into Daemon. At the beginning, he brought me on to kind of help shape some of the preliminary ideas of it and write some of the original kind of promotional material.
Okay.
But Dan was really the head honcho on that whole thing.
Yeah, so I mean, so Daemon, like, so yeah, we did HVZ, and HVZ kind of had, I mean, it was like an event on SCAD campus, and it's funny to, I think, both compare it to what it is now on SCAD campus, which I think is just dead, but then also to compare it to the other colleges that were running it at the time, where they might have like 80 players or something. And SCAD, opening night of HVZ, I remember like my freshman year, it's like a horde of like 300, 400 people just descending onto a residence hall, and everybody's just like armed to the teeth. It looks like a militia storming like it's nuts. It's honestly nuts. And to be like marching like with all these other people, and everyone's like turning around paranoid and stuff. And it was really cool just as like a experience in like emergent games, and in kind of the space that like you can't preserve this, like you can't record this, you can't keep it, like you can try, but like you really can't replay HVZ every year because it's almost like putting on like a live play or something like that. And I kind of loved how it infiltrated everyone's like everyday life when you're playing. Like people would call their friends and be like, come pick me up, like there's a bunch of dudes like outside of my my room and I need you to kill them.
Yeah.
You know, or like you have to like run while you're like eating your food to like get from the cafeteria to the safe zone. Like there's so many like great little just things where it is much more about like your lifestyle than it is about anything else. And so when I ran it my junior year, it went pretty well, but there was a lot of stuff that I would have loved to kind of do or improve or explore, and we were kind of stuck in this like framework of like, well, this is how HVZ works every year. Like this is all the stuff you're supposed to do, and if you try to change it, you're gonna like make the experience worse for people who know how it works. You know, so like this isn't like ideal as a exploration space, but we did have that large player pool of like people who like play these kinds of games and are like, this stuff's like, you know, cool, I'm going to try this out. And so senior year, I just kind of had this like crazy idea. It was honestly almost right after I ran HVZ my junior year, and it was like that summer and then senior year, and it was just like you know, let's like explore like cyberpunk and like security and like surveillance and like all of these other ideas. And so is a lot of kind of like blue sky lounging around, like people trying to like come up with these like really crazy ideas of like, well, what if everybody wore a QR code on their arm? And if you used a camera, you could use a telephoto lens to like take a photo of the QR code and then like steal their virtual money. Like, so like a lot of just like wacky, kooky ideas. I mean, we had ideas of like, we were going to have, you know, missions where you had to go to like an unidentified like storage unit and like find something in there, like a lot more kind of just like investigative, like escape room, kind of blending reality with games, you know, kind of ARG type stuff.
Like almost a performance art piece, you know, where like the players sign up to be a part of this thing, and like it has so much like trimming and character and dressing to it that it's like, yeah, it almost becomes, when you zoom out, this performance art blend of like just the technology and the players kind of improvising their way through it.
Yeah. And so running Demon was like, you know, we did kind of some blue sky explorations. We got a little lost, and then we were like, all right, let's try just using AR to do stuff. We also had an idea of using like low energy beacons where people could like hack each other in proximity through walls, and that didn't really work. That's kind of the problem of relying on like emergent tech, is that it's changing so fast and it doesn't always work, which is kind of the problem with VR. But so we finally got like kind of the game together and figured out, and then it was like, okay, we're going to build props and we're going to, you know, kind of use all of the muscles that we've been exercising on HVZ for the past, you know, 3-4 years to go and just basically make this crazy like love letter to all the people who played those things. And just be like, here's this like completely crazy advanced version of this game that you sort of recognize, but is also completely different. And you are going to go to all these different interesting places and do stuff you've never done before, where you're like a detective, where you're collaborating with other teams, where you're fighting other teams. And it was just a really fun playground for like mission design and storytelling. Like we had like audio logs you could find. We had one of the missions is that there's a VHS, like set of VHS tapes that you're like literally fighting over, and the VHS tapes have codes. So you have to actually take them and watch them at a TV set that like you're protecting and stuff. And like other players are fighting and like bargaining for the tapes and stuff. And just a lot of like fun ways of creating like storytelling, basically, kind of in like the world, and then also not doing it so heavy-handedly that like the players couldn't write their own story. But like the thing that I kind of wanted for that game, and I think we did a good job of, was the idea of like the Shandified narrative. I don't know if you've watched any like YouTube video essays, but there's this guy who talks about the difference between Fallout 3 and Fallout New Vegas, and it's called the Shandification of Fallout. And he basically says like Fallout 3 is very like linear. You go A to B to C to D, and that's kind of the game. And then Fallout New Vegas is designed as like, hey, you could go to A, but then you could also go straight to X, and then like you could go to W, and then you could go to, you know, G, and it would all make sense in the story. And it's like anywhere you look under a rock, the story is there. It's not like, you know, it's not part of the world. And so that's what we really tried to do very hard with that. And I think we did a pretty good job, but it was a lot of fun, and doing AR targets and stuff, and just kind of exploring cyberpunk motifs and everything.
I mean, it certainly looked from the teases I was able to get from it, and the little glimpse and glances of it that I got to see of it or whatnot, it looked like a really interesting, like unique little concept with kind of the blended, obviously augmented reality, just kind of the, especially what you're talking about, like how elaborate it could be with like some of the videotapes and such. Like it's honestly, it looks really cool. It looks like it was executed like fairly well given the technology or whatnot, and I can only imagine, especially given the SCAD campus or whatnot, how interesting it must have been to see it kind of play out.
Yeah, and I mean we ran it, it was like 3 days, 8 missions. And so we were kind of just on for like 72 straight hours, basically, like running that game. And like, every mission was like maybe 2 hours. So it'd be like, you'd set up all of the props and all of the things and where everybody's supposed to be. And then all the players come in, you run it, and then you're immediately like, okay, we got to take it all down. And then we got to, go set up the next spot. We got to fix any bugs or whatever else, print out whatever targets we need. So it was pretty like chaotic. And I had spent, I think, a good 3 straight days, no sleep, just like coding and getting everything ready to go, because you're deploying it to apps. So it was insane, but it was like, it felt great to exercise like every part of my brain of like the physical gaming and like the like coaching players and like the props and the visual design and then like the coding and like, all of the other like game design stuff I'd picked up over the years. And yeah, I mean, we had like a gallery show at the end. That was like supposed to be the final mission. That was really cool. That was fun to curate and to get a bunch of like new media artists to, submit their stuff and then have like basically a free gallery show for them, which was cool. And then, yeah, for people from like all over the world too, because John, who is he's on. What's the name of his game right now? It's a BZ Piezo File, which has gotten a lot of really great attention. He was on the team too, and he's a video artist. That's not his like main thing that he does now, but he did a lot of like curation and kind of like getting people to submit and stuff, because he does a lot of really legit interesting new media work. So that was really like great. But yeah, there's a whole like 2.5-hour documentary about this that explores all of it, and it's a little dated. Like I'll go back and watch it, and I'll cringe for maybe the first like 15 minutes at myself, because I'm like, I wish I would shut up. Like, but nonetheless, like it goes over like how all the missions were set up and like how we designed the game and kind of our headspace making it and all of our influences. So if this is something that interests you, it's a really cool watch.
It's a good piece.
I definitely got to take the time to sit down and watch it as well, because like I said, I saw it like as I was doing the research to get ready for this episode and whatnot, and I was just amazed by it. Like, I don't get me wrong, it's not like, ooh, technology interesting. Like, obviously, like, I got like a VR headset right there, so like this kind of stuff always kind of interested me in the first place. So like seeing how interesting it was to execute this kind of thing, it makes me intrigued to know kind of the behind the scenes behind it and see how you're able to set it up, how to execute it, all that kind of stuff. So because I can only imagine how incredible it was, but also how chaotic it was to execute this.
Yeah, well, and I don't want to belabor the point, because we're gonna move on to other stuff. But I'll say that like with Demon and with making it and everything, like I think a lot of our headspace was like, we have all this tech, it does all this interesting stuff, and nobody is using it to its full potential, either because they don't have the vision or they don't have the money, or they don't have like the tech to mess with or like the know-how. And so that was, I think for us, it was just kind of like, how can we like take this, thing that's mainly used in like advertising, and this was before Pokemon Go too, that we were doing this. So like we were like the first like crazy ambitious AR game that of course like nobody knows about, because it's like 80 people played it, 100 people played it, like of course, but it really was like, let's just try and like push the envelope as hard as we can of like trying to take this thing and make it like really interesting, instead of just like having it be displaying like virtual baubles.
There you go. Now, hearing obviously Bobby's little, help with the project, is this around the time that you guys both more or less met? Like, how did you guys link up and really start working together?
Oh, we met, what was it, 2012? 2012? Yeah.
That's when I started going to college,
Yeah.
And he was in the HVZ group, so that's really how we got to know each other.
Yeah. Okay. Most all of our collaborators are from that game that we played back in the day. Friends and collaborators. That's kind of, every time we link up, if it's been a while, it usually rotates back around to remembering those old war stories from back in college playing that game. But yeah, so we met in 2012, and I always liked being around artists that weren't in my discipline.
Okay.
Because it kind of gave me a more well-rounded appreciation of like what was actually out there, and also it kind of like I don't know, it fills out your social group to have people of those different perspectives and how they can talk about stuff. But yeah, so we met in 2012, played that game. I helped work on like kind of the early stages of
That blue sky period when we were kind of throwing everything at the wall and seeing what stuck.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I graduated and moved to New York before that game was actually played. So I think we kept in touch a little bit, probably here and there. And I saw like Midnight Ultra come out, and I heard you guys like working on stuff and seeing it. And I'm always impressed anytime anyone finishes anything. It's so hard to do. Especially at the beginning, because you're basically just driving completely on just passion.
Yeah.
You know, it's like no one's just like, oh, we heard you want to make something. Here's $1 million. There, you know, you got to prove it to yourself and to others first before you get to that stage. So anyone who's completing things just on that passion is always very impressive to me. So as soon as I saw Midnight Ultra come out, I basically was like, hey Dan, like, you actually finish stuff. So if I can help out, let me know. That was that start.
And you know, he worked on like one project that we wound up, you know, shelving for now. And then out of that project, it was kind of a group of collaborators like around like COVID. I think I want to say like maybe like October of 2020 or so.
Started.
And yeah,
2019.
Goodness.
Well, that's when we started working on Keepsake County, was 2020 though, for sure. And and we were just like, you know, we're tired of this old project we're working on, and it's kind of like the Midnight Ultra thing where it's like, we're tired of this big project we're working on. Like, let's just get something out the door and feel some success. And it was like, all right, let's shelve this shit and let's go do something. And so we had this prototype called The Neighbors, and it was based on the town that dreaded sundown. Like aesthetically, it was based on it, and kind of like setting wise, it was based on it. And it was supposed to be basically like a kind of a blend of like Among Us and Trouble in Terrorist Town.
Okay.
Essentially, it was supposed to be multiplayer, and we had a kind of okay prototype working.
It was fun. It worked.
Yeah, well, and then what happened was that our networking solution got like canned, and so then it stopped working, and it was like, and you know, and I always have like a rotating roster of like, if somebody's like, how many game ideas do you have right now? I'm like, I don't know, like 5 or 6. You know, it's like, well, how many prototypes do you have right now? I'm like, I don't know, like 3 or 4. You know, just like sitting like on my computer somewhere hiding, and so this was just like one of those, and I was like, okay, well, let's like work on this thing, but like let's take the most interesting character from this game and make them the main character of their own game. And you know, for that it was the killer, and then from there it was like, okay, well, we can't make a game about going into people's houses and killing them, so like let's let's make something more palatable and interesting than that. And so then it kind of slowly evolved into Keepsake County. And I remember Bobby had been on the previous project mostly as a writer, and I wound up coming to visit Atlanta on the way back maybe from my sister's wedding. Okay. And so I came through Atlanta and I stayed at Bobby's place, and I hadn't been to Atlanta really. I hadn't stayed anywhere, you know, there, and I hadn't really hung out with Bobby after college. But we hung out, we were talking, we were chatting, and we were kind of like working through the ideas. And I had like these doodles of like the bag and like the, you know, the hammer and screwdriver, like, so like some of just like the basic stuff. And, you know, Bobby took those and started being like, okay, well, let's, you know, and like working out like the hands and stuff. And then he started working on the first character.
Okay. Because originally The Neighbors was a 3D piece.
Yeah.
And I forget like how it came about. I think we were talking about like how do we make a game without needing like a bunch of 3D models and 3D animators and like getting all this. And I somewhere along that pipeline we were like, well, why don't we just make the assets like really articulated 2D, almost like, you know.
it was that I wanted to do a game that had risograph printing as
That's what
like the yeah, that's what it was. It was I wanted to have a game that had risograph printing for all the textures and everything, which would have been fabulously expensive, and it would have worked when I was living in Los Angeles because I had free access to a risograph machine, so I actually could have gotten away with that and not had to pay for any of it, or not pay very much. And so it was like, well, how can we do the characters? And it's like, well, if we just do the characters and then we put a risograph texture on them, it's gonna look like ass, you know? And then it was like, okay, well, what if we do the characters and we like print out the sprites and then like cut them out and then like scan them back in, you know?
Okay.
Crazy pipeline stuff that was not not reasonable really in any sort of way, but that is, you know, really what spiraled out into like, well, let's do all the characters like Doom style, you know? And that's really where Bobby was like coming in with like the Toon Boom method.
Yeah.
There you go.
Well, yeah.
I was gonna say, well, I think part of a major, you know, I can only imagine for you, Bobby, especially like you probably knew how to do the Toon Boom, you know, system about it well because of your experience in the industry, not just previously, but like actually getting a chance to work in all sorts of different animated projects and such. Like as I was doing my research on you individually, like I was just amazed with the amount of projects that you were able to have your hand in one way or another. Especially whenever you had like you were working at Bento Box, which I can only imagine. In an atmosphere like that, it must have been really interesting. Some of the unique shows and concepts that you had a chance to work on here and there.
Yeah, it was really nice. It was really nice going and working in uh, a studio space from going from like where pretty much everything I was making was like by myself.
Right.
Illustrated pieces. I used to illustrate some children's books and my own work and paintings and everything. So, but I always had this picture in the back of my mind. You know, there's behind the scenes, the old Disney movies where it's all these old guys with drafting tables, and it's like they're architects as animators. You know, and I always loved the idea of like being in proximity of that type of workflow. So, getting able to move to Atlanta and work in the animation industry here when it was like this really kind of bountiful area for that type of work was really nice. I got to meet a lot of people. Some of those folks I actually brought on for Keepsake. So some of the other animators were folks I met while I was at that studio. But yeah, getting to work on all these different shows with different like styles and everything. For me, I was less focused on like whether I liked the show and whether it was like this is something I would watch, and more just looked at all of it as an opportunity to just really get good, like really just build up the actual technical skills of those things, and working in those different styles definitely helped.
I mean, especially with like some of the shows that I was able to see that you worked on with like Bento Box, such as like Hoops, Paradise PD, you know, something along like that. One of the ones that jumped out at me, and this is ironic because I've actually interviewed another guest, and they also told me about a very similar experience because I think they also worked at Bento Box. Is doing animated segments for The Masked Singer.
Yeah.
I was gonna say,
I did the popcorn lady. I did a little bit of that.
Okay, interesting. I was gonna say, see, I'm gonna throw a name out there, and I wouldn't be surprised if you know this person. Do you know Travis Fowler?
Oh, Travis! I saw him 2 nights ago. I was playing poker with him.
That's perfect. That's what's ironic.
Dungeon Flippers.
I was gonna say I'm probably gonna cut this part out right here, but literally this episode is supposed to come out a week before his episode comes out.
Yeah. Yeah, Travis is a good dude.
Travis is a great person, but back to what I was talking about.
Yeah.
I can only imagine with some of the stuff, not just with Bento Box, but like in actually to work in like a studio space like that, like and kind of like what you're talking about, not so much the quality of the show, but just getting to toy around with some of these like unique atmospheres and like these unique concepts, and really getting like your getting a little dirt under your nails, I guess, or something along the lines of that. You know, really getting a chance to work on that stuff. Must have been a real eye-opening experience there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that like for me again I viewed it as a craftsman lens instead of like, you know, oh boy, I'm working on a cartoon. You know, for me, I was just like, I wanted like the technical side of it. I wanted to view it as if I was showing up for work like it was any other job.
Right.
And it was very interesting to see the different styles of animators and the different like techniques. And you got to see the rise of like, oh, this person's really good at traditional emotional beats. This person's really good at the like hyper perspective action sequences. This person's really good at dialogue, and kind of seeing the blend of all those different different pieces in the other animators I worked with was really nice.
Well, there you go.
Plus, you learn a lot of like pre-production and post-production stuff being around those disciplines as well.
I can only imagine. I mean, it's like not just with those shows, but I imagine some of the other projects you had a hand in here and there. What I know, another one that actually jumped out at me is this cool little indie animated projects that released not too long ago. You got a chance to work on Godspeed.
Ooh, Godspeed.
Yes,
Yes.
I can only imagine. I can only imagine how unique and fun of an experience it must have been to be able to play in that sandbox for a little bit.
Yeah, Godspeed was incredible to work on. That was one of my favorite things I've been a part of.
Okay.
Working with Olin Rogers was a breeze. He has a really great energy, and like I said, those people motivated by passion
Yes.
and that kind of like, even when there is money, it's like just for the love of doing it. You can like feel that radiating off of him, and working with Ben, the director, and all the other crew members. It was such a small crew. There was a really small handful of animators, and because of that, there was all sorts of opportunities to just like, hey, I'm going to try this. I'm going to push this here. And, the director would be like, oh, hey, what do you think about this? And it was really collaborative. So what you got out of Godspeed is really the result of the people that worked on it. Where when you work in larger studios, the result that you have, it's like, you might have these little pockets here and there that are, oh, I can tell this shot was done by this animator. But really, it's much more of a conveyor belt factory system of like, we're completing the storyboards. But with Godspeed, there was really this room and this encouragement to take the scene we were working on and give it as much depth as we possibly can. Like shoot far past what we're kind of given, and then reel it back in, make it more subtle, but really just try and find out how you can make it the best at every level. So it was nice to work on something that didn't feel like a cog in the system,
Right.
but like, again, that kind of craftsman input that I was looking for. Godspeed's something I'm tremendously proud of, and I look forward to seeing where that goes in the future.
You and me both. I was gonna say, I know Olin Rogers is someone I'd love to have on the podcast at some point. Just knowing the passion they had for Godspeed, for Final Space, for just kind of his career up to this point. I mean, kind of like we were talking about, like, when you were talking about, like, for example, working at Bento Box, I was more or less like honing in on your craft and really, fine tuning your skills. Godspeed, from what you're talking about, is really a chance for you to really exhibit those skills and really let the creativity flow through your skills more than anything else.
Yeah, it was like I worked at Bento for those years so that I would be able to take on Godspeed. Those years led to Godspeed. Yeah.
Well, I imagine those years also led to, obviously, the big game that we are here to talk about, that I really want to talk about a lot, and that is Keepsake County. I know we already kind of illustrated kind of how we got to this point, and Danny, thank you for that. But for those who may be curious and may have never even heard of this game before tuning into today's episode, how would you guys describe Keepsake County, a Midwestern stealth game?
So Keepsake County, a Midwestern stealth game, is a procedurally generated immersive sim where you break into people's houses and then steal really useless stuff like garden gnomes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's about how I describe it, to be honest. Praised by Warren Spector, so it's got the immersive sim stamp of approval on it. Yeah, he was at DreamHack last winter, and it was a total surprise. He came up to the booth to talk to us.
Okay.
And yeah, cool dude, very nice guy.
I can only imagine. And you guys,
pleasure to talk to.
It sounds like he'd be a pleasure to talk to, especially getting his little stamp of approval. Now, you guys said that you've been working on this game since what, 2019, 2020-ish or whatnot? Like how exactly did we get
late
to this
2020?
Late 2020. Yeah. How exactly did we get to this point? I know, again, you kind of elaborate, it was start off as this initial concept with like Among Us and Trouble in Terrorist Town, evolved to this point. But how do we get here now? How do we get from, how did you guys settle on this concept officially and like making this the official thing you wanted to go forward with? And how did the game develop to where we are today?
Boy, oh boy. Yeah, I mean, I can go on about that. Bobby, do you want to interject before I start talking for like 20 minutes?
I can interject when we come to the point of developing the kind of feeling and atmosphere of some of the houses and the characters, and kind of my point of where when I came in after kind of the gameplay and the mechanics and everything,
Okay.
based on what Dan kind of originally had this vision for, and then me getting to play in those kind of boundaries of like, okay, so this is what we're doing. How can I, again, like with Godspeed, it's like, how can I take something and then give it as much depth as I can without going so far that it's impossible to do within a reasonable amount of time. But that kind of comes in after Dan set the kind of groundwork for what the game ultimately is in its function. So I'll let him go for that, and then I'll tag in when we talk about the actual kind of character of the game.
Well, then, Danny, the floor is yours.
So I mean, so we had this concept. We got to, okay, who's the most interesting person, and then from there it was like, all right, well, I was married to the idea of having houses be the levels, basically. And our level designer at the time was working on it. And he was, I think, not as crazy about making houses as levels, because it turns out if you try to make a house as a level, it's miserable. Working from blueprints sucks. And so he wound up leaving the team to go do his own thing and stuff. And, God bless him, love him. He was one of our main level designers on Midnight Ultra.
Okay.
But and so I was kind of stuck with this problem of, okay, we're making a stealth game. It's set in houses. How do we make the houses interesting, and like where do we, kind of work from there? Because there's going to be like all these bespoke, like handmade houses, and it turns out that's a huge pain in the butt. And so I kind of went into the bag of tricks, and I was like, well, I don't know that I'm going to have the wherewithal to do the coding and the design, and then also make these really well constructed, finely made levels. And so I kind of looked around, and I'd really been reading a lot about procedural generation for a while, and kind of hadn't known what to do with it. And Spelunky was a big inspiration, and then also this stealth game that was kickstarted like forever ago. Jess Harvey, who's a cool like acquaintance of mine, friend of mine, mutual on Twitter, did Tangiers, and they wound up doing a Paratopic, I think like, a few years back, won the IGF for sound. Yeah, really, really cool person, and they, are continuing to make really fascinating, interesting games. But Tangiers was also an immersive sim that was using some like randomized procedural generation elements, and I'd been following that. And while it's, kind of, still in development right now, I was like thinking about that, and I was thinking about Spelunky, and it was just like, how can we like make these interesting levels where I don't have to like hand bespoke put everything together, and it still is like really interesting and stuff. And so it was like basically like, okay, well, let's try to make a house that just develops room by room, basically, and each of the rooms have different loot in it, and they all have like different layouts and stuff, and so you can just kind of like bash these together like Legos, basically. Okay. And so that was kind of the procedural generation like basis, and that has since evolved where it's like every room has like a little stealth puzzle, basically, and you have all this like different variants and stuff. But like, yeah, the gameplay, it was supposed to be like very quick. It was supposed to be like very casual. Like you were not allowed to spend more than 4 minutes in a house or you would get arrested, period. And so that made for a very like harsh experience. And, people push back on that like a lot of like, this isn't like very fun. I want to be in the space longer and like do things. I don't want this to be all about like speed running. And so that's kind of like where it developed. But the gameplay was always supposed to be this kind of like smash and grab, work fast or like be slow and pick out like all of the most valuable stuff. And it's really just inspired by like Bethesda games. Okay. Like where you're specifically like not really doing anything that crazy. You're just like walking through rooms, and it's like Fallout where you're just like looking at every single stupid bit and bob on the ground and like looking through the trash can and just like grabbing like everything. So it's like, okay, well, that's kind of funny in its own way. There's like a whole Mega 64 skit about like BioShock where they're like literally just groveling through trash cans in San Diego. And so I had that like in my head of just like, well, this is kind of funny. Like, let's try and make like a whole game out of this. And sort of like put together like some of the more like immersive sim mechanics of like controlling the lights and like, enemies you have to dodge and stuff. And I think from there it got a little bit out of hand, and now we're here. So, but that was where it started, and then I think just as people have, given suggestions, as we've kind of grown, I think some of the themes and setting of the game, that's kind of like where it arrived at. And like the Midwestern setting, I think is really where, it kind of inspires the imagination a bit, because the idea was like, let's make a stealth game where you would never want to have a stealth game. And so it was like, well, what's like the most boring place to put a stealth game? It's like the Midwest. There's a bunch of fields. It's wide open. It's boring ass houses. Like nobody wants to have a stealth game here. And it was like, that's a really interesting design challenge. How can we like, really like work with this and like figure out, okay, like what is Midwest culture? Because like I'm from the Midwest, but like, it's a little nebulous, right? Yeah. To kind of be like, what, casserole? Tornadoes?
I'll say, look, I was born in central Illinois, so I have a rough idea when it comes to Midwest stuff. That place, I like to constantly joke that there's nothing in central Illinois but cornfields and meth. So I get where you're coming from.
Yeah, I'm from like Northeast Ohio, so okay. I'm not much farther from you, from where you grew up. So yeah. So, and I have a couple of friends from the Midwest too. And so it was kind of a funny thing to put our heads together on, but it was also like kind of this, like, it's something that I really like about making games in general. And maybe just my preference for media too is like, let's take the boring and mundane and make it kind of absurd and surreal. Mm-hmm. It's almost like the other side of the coin from horror. Of like, let's take the boring and mundane and make it horrifying and unnerving. It's like, let's take that, and maybe we could do that, but also we could just make it interesting, like Kentucky Route Zero,
right,
and stuff. And so that's, I think where Bobby really came in, was like coming up with kind of like, oh, okay, well, like, Courage the Cowardly Dog, but also like, what was the name of that haunted house game?
Oh,
that you were showing
Wilson's
me?
Ultimate Haunted House. A long-lost game from the 90s, man. I love that, and I've still not been able to beat it. I need to do that. It's a really interesting old point and click game.
Okay.
Definitely check it out. He was an old Gain Wilson wasn't. I think I'm pronouncing his name right. It was an old like New Yorker comic artist, and he ended up making like a point and click haunted house game that at times seems like it definitely wasn't for kids. But yeah, I remember like when we were talking about this and the idea of okay, we're stealing from these kind of suburban houses, and I started thinking about how originally it was like The Neighbors, this idea of almost like you're a guy stealing just random objects from houses, things that like might not necessarily have monetary value but sentimental value. Right. And this is kind of before we had the name Keepsake County.
That was your name that you came up with, actually.
Was it?
Yeah, you came up with Keepsake County because we were like, The Neighbors is too generic. We gotta for SEO purposes come up with a better name.
Well, shoot, all right.
Just take the credit. Right. Just take the credit.
Sure, okay. Yeah. So I just remember thinking about like, okay, the houses need to be interesting, and again, coming into Forward Instinct as the writer, that was where like my brain started going, is this idea of like, well, each house should have a story. That's kind of, if you're in there to get in and get out, I would hope that there's at least some temptation to, but if I stay longer, there might be something I find here more interesting than the loot I'm stealing. There's a story here in this house that I might kind of stumble into and learn something about the people who live here. And I started reflecting upon games like Gone Home, which I love. These kind of like, or Mist, where you're like, can I explore an environment and learn about the people who live here by the things I'm stealing from them, which I thought was a really interesting angle. So I started thinking about like, okay, well, other stealth kind of silly kind of burglary games. So I started thinking about Sly Cooper, which is one of my favorites. Yes. And I was like, okay, so if we operate Sly Cooper, where there's this kind of weird illustrative quality, and now we're doing 2D animation. It's like, okay, well, we can take that and this Midwestern kind of orange and purpley colors made me think a lot about like early Nickelodeon cartoons, all the Klasky Scupo stuff, or like Hey Arnold and Rocket Power and Rugrats. And so I started kind of hitting it from that angle and thinking about the Ultimate Haunted House game, and from there trying to build up this idea of like, okay, each house needs to have these really pronounced characters that all have these backstories, you know.
We one of the like early inspirations too was, you know, we were coming up with how the characters should look and stuff, and you know, this is just me like mood boarding and stuff. And for me, one of the really big ones was that, because we were kind of like talking, we were like, well, if you're robbing normal people, then like you can't really make them like likable, or you're gonna feel bad.
Right.
Like
they need to be a little kind of
a lot of the like development of Keepsake County has been kind of guided by like walking this tightrope of like morally what feels gross versus like what's acceptable and stuff. And one of the big inspirations for me, you know, of kind of going in that grotesque direction and kind of the absurdist funny direction was Will Laren. He did like all these like really, you know, just hilarious comics for like Adult Swim and so many other things. And it's these incredibly like mundane people who are obsessed with something incredibly specific, who are, you know, they're white, they're milquetoast, and they're very like grotesque and kind of horrifying to look at. And I think Bobby, you know, saw a little bit of that too, and also was like, yeah, like maybe we shouldn't make them that ugly.
Well, I was taking that and like kind of bringing in a little bit of Far Side comics, where there's a little bit of a wide-eyed roundness to them that gives them this kind of like staring off into the distance
beer dads.
So like taking some of those more like gritted teeth, kind of like type characters from that, with the kind of blank stare of Far Side, and then throwing in some of the more rounded edges of 90s Nickelodeon stuff, with a kind of like sketchy, like even the kind of thing I have speaking for me right now, just kind of having these loose lines, these sketchy things, kind of it kind of made the world feel a little more dreamy and silly. So that when you're stealing stuff from them, it doesn't necessarily automatically make you feel like, oh, this is a game where you play a bad guy. Especially when like the things he's stealing is like slices of pizza, you know, or like ceramic cats. You know, there's this kind of idea that I was thinking of where almost like the main character doesn't quite understand the concept of value. Where it's like, oh, he's stealing these objects to make money. So how does he know what's worth money? Well, he looks at what do people value. And a lot of these people, they're just living in these suburban houses or kind of in the middle of nowhere. The things they value are these little trinkets, these little kind of family things that they're potted plants. And this guy almost like is looking at it as, oh, they really care about that teddy bear. That means that teddy bear has a lot of value. And almost looking at the keepsakes is like, he's interacting with the characters he's stealing from by almost sharing the value that they place on an item. He just is misunderstanding that as a monetary thing. So
that's honestly a really interesting way of kind of going about it. Just kind of like not so much the value as in like looking online on your phone or whatnot, or you know, going to some computer to figure out like the value of it. It's just seeing how people treasure certain things and thinking, oh, that's the treasure. That's gonna be worth a lot of money. That's why I need.
They care about it, so it must have value.
Exactly. That's really interesting. That's really. I say it's almost like borderline bold. That's like the way you're attacking this. You guys attack this concept.
Well, I think a lot of it is like with Dan's interest in those smash and grab kind of speed. You know, Hotline Miami and a
Payday 2.
Payday 2, a lot of that stuff. For me, it was like I'm as far as pace wise, I'm much more of an Animal Crossing guy. so I think it's been a really nice blend of those two kind of rhythms, because game, like for me, it's kind of forced it into this position where, without intending to slow down mechanically what Dan's trying to do, but rather like give a little bit more of a reason to slow down if you want to, you know, or like this idea of even if you go through something fast, make sure it has a reason that's beyond just, oh, it's there mechanically. So yeah, the main character, okay, you're just a burglar. You go in, you steal stuff. That's the game. But for me, I wanted to reward people for like, but if they wanted to look more into it, there would be something there for them to find. It's not essential to enjoy the experience, but for people who want to spend more time in the world and more time thinking about what the game is thematically, there's things that would reward them for doing so without being a distraction.
Well, there you go. I mean, again, it's a really interesting way to kind of attack this point, really go forth, and honestly, seeing how that more or less continue to develop into the game you guys are presenting, with Keepsake County, I can't help but love it even more. Like, ever since, like I said, whenever I saw your guys' demo at MomoCon, I was just absolutely amazed with it. The art choices that you guys made are instantly like you cling on to, because it's almost got like a cozy Saturday morning cartoon feel to it whenever you're like with the art style alone, kind of like we were talking about with like the early Nickelodeon 90s cartoons and such. Like, he really did a good job executing that, but like especially seeing like how the gameplay itself kind of works out and hearing kind of the backstory behind it, like, it makes me love this game more and more, and I hadn't even had a chance to properly play it throughout. Like, it makes me excited to like get my hands on it and really go forth with it. Like, if that's the reaction I'm having, I can only imagine what's been like for you guys being able to showcase this stuff at different conventions and like the reception you guys have been getting there. Like, it has to be almost rewarding to see people like loving this goofy little concept at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's been nice. It's been nice to see, people of different ages too, where you'll have little kids. I think like the art style, it kind of, it lends itself to all ages. The content of it is still, you're a burglar. It's got enough of this like silly innocence that it's not too adult. If you're old enough to play Sly Cooper, you can handle it.
It has so like we there's a period where you're working on your own game and you have to self-promote, right? And so one of the big places to do that is TikTok. And you say that, but we've actually managed to do pretty well there when we were like really focusing on it. And
sorry, I wasn't saying that in a bad way. I mean, I use TikTok as well, so like, trust me, I get like
I am.
Yeah, I was saying like you're talking about TikTok. I'm like, oh, that makes sense. That's what I was meaning by that. Because like I use TikTok a lot, and that's how I get introduced to like a lot of different. That's how I get introduced to like different like musicians, for example, or like people that I want to potentially have on the podcast at some point.
Yeah. I gotcha. Well, so we we kind of were like trying to think of like how to promote the game, and one of the ways that we found the way to do it was, and Bobby's using it right now, is kind of the talking head like character, like talking about the game, describing the game, like how we made it and stuff like that. What lends it to, I think, sort of the audience that it does, especially the youthful audience that it has, is it's a lot of chaos. We did an interview with Super Jump, and they kind of asked me about it, and it's like Keepsake County is basically the anti-save scumming game. If you know what save scumming is, if you don't know what it is, save scumming is basically like you play something like Dishonored or Fallout New Vegas or something else, and you basically have like a risky choice you're about to make. Like, let's say I'm going to jump off this roof and I got to land on this guy's head and then stab him, or it's like I got to take this dialogue choice, or I'm going to try to pickpocket this guy, or I'm going to try to like shoot this dude in the corner while nobody can see him. And
Disco Elysium.
Yeah, and so you're saving, and then you're making this risky choice, and then you're like, oh, it didn't work out, I missed, or somebody saw me, or whatever, and like, oh, I'll just go back to my old save, and you can't do that in Keepsake County. There is no saving, and so what winds up happening is the game is mostly about making the best of a terrible situation where you have broken in through the window, and you wind up stepping on a bag of chips, so people come to the room, and then you're stealing stuff and you accidentally turn on the microwave or set off an alarm clock or something, and there's a yippy little dog in the corner and it's barking at you, and you're like, oh crap, like I gotta get out of this complicated like filled up room with all this furniture, and there's people screaming, oh my god, what do I do? And somebody starts coming at you with a shotgun, so you just grab the chair from the table and you throw it at them, and they get like knocked out for a second, and you have a second to steal the rug, run out the door, get into your car, and drive the hell away. Maybe you're walking into the house and the pizza man comes and rings the doorbell, and so you're able to get in because everybody's going to check on the pizza man and pick up their pizza. Or the cops get called, and so now like you've got to make out with all of your really expensive loot, and you've got to sneak past the police and all this stuff. It's really about like things go wrong and then you have to figure out what to do. And because of just all of the like little interactions in the game of turning on the lights, flipping on the microwave, like all of these little things that kind of slowly stack up and interact with each other, it makes for controlled chaos where and that's kind of like the best thing about stuff like Spelunky or Noisha or a lot of other kind of like procedurally generated games. But then you're taking all of the weird systems of immersive sims and kind of like just slamming it into the other one at like light speed, and so as a result, you'll have people who are playing and they're just like kind of endlessly entertained and fascinated because it's like the houses are never laid out the same, the people are never in the same place, the loot's never the same, and they're playing and kind of just like having to fly by the seat of their pants the whole time. And so there's no like easy answers or like perfect way to do anything. And so as a result, I find it's very entertaining for people who both don't normally play these kinds of games because they don't like that kind of meticulous planning, or it's too hard, or it's too graphic, or too dark. But then also, yeah, like Bobby was saying, like preteens, kids, we'll have people come up and play for like an hour at a con. Wow. Just trying the same house like over and over again, or like trying all the different houses and trying to get around the various neighbors and babysitters and etc., because it's just so endlessly kind of replayable for them and holds their attention for so long.
I mean, I know, like, especially the more you're describing it or whatnot, just kind of that controlled chaos of, like, oh, everything's going wrong. Let me figure out what I can do with this last little minute thing. Like, you were talking about with, like, the Dishonored or the Fallout or whatnot, and while I personally respect that mechanic or whatnot, I'm not big into those games and such. Like, it's just not my style. But, like, hearing and seeing the chaos that goes behind Keepsake County, and especially how you're describing it of, like, the anti-save scum game or whatnot, it's a hilarious way of looking at it. And again, it makes me more excited to want to play it.
Well, we'll send you a key, but
Ooh.
Yeah, no, you'll get a key, but we'll
Can I get one?
You have a key. But wow, where was I going with that? Shoot, the thought escaped me. Oh well. Anyway,
it happens to me plenty of times before. I was gonna say, I feel like if this house, for example, if my room was part of like Keepsake County in this situation or whatnot, I feel like the thief would be probably going for something like maybe my little toy
Dude,
skeleton.
that's what I was gonna say.
You were gonna say?
Oh, maybe.
Yeah, the guy.
Maybe.
Say hi to Clyde.
So Clyde.
Every player, hello Clyde. Every player has kind of a different way of prioritizing stuff, which is also like really funny to watch.
Right.
There's some people who come in and they're wise to the world and they know I need to steal rugs. Those are worth a lot of money, and so they're like getting down on the ground and picking up all the rugs. There's people who love stealing pies. They just steal like the funniest, cutest thing in the room. And so for me, as a Keepsake County player, I would actually just start stripping all the posters off your wall.
You know what? You know what?
Yeah.
That's a good point. Considering the fact that it's the ambiance.
A lot of surface area.
Yeah, a lot of surface area. So I mean, hey, a lot of surface area. That means that must be worth a lot of stuff because there's a lot to go off of.
Exactly.
I'm the player where I go in and I read through the notes to see what the main keepsake of the house is. I think we have one level that like you read all this stuff and you find out the guy's like really big into golf. And it's like, oh, okay, he's got these like golf trophies somewhere in the house that has a lot of value, or like,
and his marriage is maybe falling apart.
And his marriage, we're like, oh, these people, they've got blueprints to everyone else's house, and maybe have a slight bit of paranoia for reasons you might be able to discover if you look through enough things.
Yeah.
So.
I feel like me personally, I would be like the kind of troll, at least for like certain houses or certain places, where I would steal just like the same of one thing in particular, like a lot of one thing. like I feel like I would go into someone's house and try to steal all their mattresses if I can, just to say that I can.
Yeah.
It's pretty good.
Like that's another fun thing. Like, I feel like the replayability that you could have with a game like this, of like having, you know, like you said, procedurally generated like houses and stuff. So like different items, different things that they can go. They can do like different kinds of gameplay every single time. They could, you know, go super stealth with it, or they could just go all in with the chaos and just roll with the punches, figuratively and literally. Maybe a few bullets here and there. And like,
honestly,
sorry,
I'll steal what. Sorry, I was gonna say that. Honestly, I'd steal whatever it takes to talk to that cute waitress at the diner. That would be my play. That'd be my play.
It's a very good play. That's a very good play. Personally, like that's another thing that I love. Is like the characters that you guys have had set up or whatnot, like as sort of the NPCs, like the characters you're basically going up against or one way or another. Like, I love each of their personalities in different ways. I love just kind of like how you're able to present them, whether it be like the father of the house or whatnot, the babysitter, the little kid football player that's more than ready to like charge at you more than anything else, the waitress. Like, I can only imagine like how fun it was to like develop such unique characters like you were talking about beforehand, and like seeing it, you know, to fruition, like, and especially seeing how people are just having a blast with what little bit they get to play so far.
Yeah. Well, a lot of the characters start with, you know, you want to make sure the game works before you make it pretty.
Right.
So it's like, okay, what mechanics do we need to showcase? Okay, we need someone who teaches the player that there's going to be some people that are going to hit you up close and personal. There's going to be some characters that are going to shoot at you. There's going to be some that run and call the cops. It's like, so you need to introduce all these mechanics. So a lot of the character design first comes from that idea of like, how do we indicate visually that this character serves a mechanical purpose, and then building a personality and a design around that.
Okay.
And that kind of helps give us a heading for those type of things. That gives you some of your color theory and your shape language influences based on like, okay, how do we indicate this to people?
Interesting.
Yeah, and stuff like intelligence as well. Like, we added the detective character, and that's probably one of the most like kind of complicated, like really really smart AI, and it sort of freaks people out actually, because they kind of don't always know how he finds them, but he's supposed to basically punish you for doing suspicious things or like making a lot of noise and stuff more than the other characters.
He's a real Columbo.
Yeah, real Columbo.
Yeah, one more thing. Oh, trust me, hearing that, another former guest I previously had on the podcast, Cosmo Perry, would go crazy just hearing about that. But like, especially seeing, you know, the reception you guys have had or whatnot, and obviously with the years of work that you guys have had behind it, I can only imagine how excited you guys are to like fully unleash this onto the world and to see everyone just have a blast with it. Like, I guess what I want to ask here is, you know, for the people that, whether they've been excited about this for a while or if this is the first time hearing it, what should they expect from Keepsake County?
Well, I guess as far as if you want to play Keepsake County right now, we do have it in sort of an early access on itch.io actually. So you can get that and you'll get the full version of the game. And we're, you know, once we're done, we'll put it out on Steam, but that's kind of how we test. But yeah, we're going to have like, you know, a full suite of like story levels to play through. We've kind of hinted at some of those. We're going to be adding more perks and a little bit more of like a kind of a well crystallized perk system and stuff for the game of like, you loot stuff, you make enough money to go and get your different perks between levels that stack up. We're gonna have a few different endings to the game as well. Right now we have 5 out of the 6 biomes that we've added to the game, and we're gonna also add some unique weather conditions, which will be really cool. Yeah, so we can maybe hint at some of those. You know, different kinds of storms, tornadoes, dust storms, that kind of stuff that might affect you as a player.
Is this how we get the Twisters movie tie-in to go in with this game?
Yeah, it's something that's been in my head for most of development, is how are we going to add tornadoes to this game?
Okay.
And I'm still figuring that out, but that is something that I'd like to do. And yeah, we'll be adding snow as well, which is going to be a huge one. That's going to be coming in probably the next few updates. And I mean, right now we have like farmland, plains. We have forest. We have lakeside, which is the architect level. And and then we have Badlands, and we also have the Ozarks. We kind of it's not technically Midwest, but I guess Missouri is, so we kind of snuck that in there.
It's
So
Midwest enough.
yeah, exactly. So yeah, so there's a lot of very different places to go and loot and see, and we're going to be adding all of these new kooky, interesting characters as we add the last few story heists, and we add the different endings to the game and stuff. So, but that'll be very fun, and the goal is to try to. I think at this point we're probably going to be releasing very early next year.
Okay.
Is kind of what it's looking like. So yeah, so soon. Not super soon, but soon.
Yeah, soon.
Yeah.
In other words, definitely keep your eyes when it comes to, Forward Instinct, Lone Pine Media. Hell, keep an eye on the, podcast because, like the, socials or whatnot, because as soon as you guys release this thing, I'm definitely spreading the word about it as best as I can because, hell yeah. Hell yeah.
Thank you very much.
Oh, no, absolutely. Like, especially with what I've been able to hear, what I've been able to see beforehand or whatnot, like, there's no reason why this game shouldn't at least get some love and attention from especially the indie game community out there. Like, I've already gushed about it enough, and I'll probably gush about it a little more later, but still, like, this looks like just an absolute fun game that is just absolute control chaos that I feel like anyone can almost, like you were talking about, of any age group, anyone can kind of just step in and find a different way to have a fun time, whether they're just going in just to cause chaos or if they want to try to be meticulous and try to find some way to be a little bit more stealthy with it, or if they just want to be trolls and try to steal certain things and mess with some of the NPCs. Like there's a lot of playability and replayability with this that I think a lot of people, if they're not interested at this point, should definitely be interested whenever this game does, drop past early access at this point, because I feel like there's a lot that people can enjoy with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's very funny to watch kind of, I think, the streamer reactions of like the early adopters, because you'll see somebody like play for the first time and they have no idea what they're doing and they're getting absolutely spooked by every single sound they hear and every NPC they see, and they don't know what to do when things go wrong. And then I was so impressed, Alpha Beta Gamer, like maybe a few months into the like alpha, picked up the game, and I saw that he picked up the game, and I was just like, oh okay, that's that's interesting. And I didn't like try to reach out to them or anything like that, because I knew we weren't ready, but we kept on working on the game. And then last summer they just randomly decided to put up a video of them playing Keepsake County, and one of the most masterful players I have seen playing through Keepsake County knew exactly what to do, knew exactly how to like ring the doorbell, distract somebody, hop in, climb in through the roof off of the trampoline, just like quantum brain, like 4D chess gameplay. So it really is there. The possibilities are there to be very, very clever playing Keepsake County. And yeah, I love to see how everybody tries to approach the game, because it's always very different.
Absolutely. I mean, I can imagine, especially for both of you, like I can only imagine how excited you guys are for this thing to almost be there at the finish line, like to really unleash this onto the world and to see how people are going to love and enjoy it, considering all the years of hard work you guys have put into this game.
Yes. Well, yeah, we were both definitely very excited about that.
It's like, you look at Midnight Ultra, and then you look at Keepsake County, and I think the growth as a studio in terms of what our aim is, as far as like an interactive experience, is like the growth there is clear. So for me, it's like I love Keepsake County, and I love the time working on it. I'm very excited to kind of get this going and kind of unleash it into the world. But part of that excitement is also for, okay, then what's going to be the next one? What's the next thing? Like Dan said, he's always got like 6 games that he's ideas, a couple of, demos, and I'm always writing stuff and drawing and working all these preliminary ideas on my end. And it's like, I think both of us are kind of, we're excited to work on things, and we're even more excited to start working on new things. Almost as soon as we start working on something, it's just, all right, let's get this.
Absolutely.
Keep going.
Yeah.
It's like, I know you said you had, I was to say, Dan, I know you said you had like 5 or 6 ideas always floating around, so I'm intrigued, especially after Keepsake County's actually out there. I'm interested to see where you basically throw that dart and which one kind of sticks, and you're like, okay, let's work on this, let's make this interesting.
Yeah.
I'll say, as a matter of fact, Well, actually, I'll ask this question, then I'll ask the question I want to ask. Like, just like not only with just this, and like obviously seeing the cool reception that you guys have had with this, but like not just Keepsake County, but thinking back to both of y'all's art journey as a whole, like just how far you guys have come from the early days of being exposed to like comics and black and white films to where you are right now. Are you both amazed more or less with the art journey you both have been on, either separately or together?
Huh. Oh, to me, it's been such a meticulous brick by brick kind of journey to where I am now that I think me from 10 years ago would be like really impressed, but I
Okay.
think me now is kind of like, well, this is just the result of slowly climbing up the mountain, handhold by handhold all the way up. And so it's, to me, it's like I'm not going to be impressed until, I don't know, not now. Maybe later,
Okay.
but for now it's like I'm not really the type to kind of look back and take stock in my work and be like, I'm Superman. It's more like, it's like, well, okay, time to keep going. Like that's really how I view myself.
You know what? I respect that. I respect that. How about
Yeah.
yourself, Bobby?
Well, hmm, I think it's like when you look at the whole, it's yeah, it's as far as like look, am I amazed? I'm not sure. I mean, it's very similar to what Dan said, where it's like, yeah, me 10 years ago. You start out when you get into wanting to make art, you're like, okay, when I grow up, I'll make cartoon, I want to make movies, and I want to draw cartoon characters. And it's like you get to that point, and and you start going, oh, I'm already there. Oh, I gotta aim for something more difficult then. I have to
Okay.
aim for a bigger challenge. I have to like, my goal uh was not big enough. So let's keep moving. So
Okay.
I have not necessarily an amazement, but an appreciation for being
Yeah.
able to hit these markers
There you go.
and say I can take on more. It's like, okay, that goal, great, hit it. What's the next one? What's the heavier load I can carry, and how can I push forward as a craftsman in these art forms? So I would say I have an appreciation and a gratitude for the place I've made it to.
Okay. You know what? Again, valid. I respect that. And like, I trust me. I get exactly where you guys are coming from that one. So for that next project, if I may, what if I give you guys a little bit of, as I may say, the dream scenario? Let's say I am Big Shot Mr. Moneybags. I come up to you guys. I'm like, look, Daniel, Bobby, you guys are doing some incredible stuff these days. Like, we've seen what you've been able to, both past and present, what you've been able to do, tinker around with, really present to everyone. We think there is something there. We know that there's something there. You just need that little extra push, a little extra platform to get you to that point. We have access to everyone and anyone in whatever industry possible, and more money than there should be possible. We really should be compensating the animators. That strike is coming up really, really soon. We really want to avoid that.
Yeah.
But we'll focus on that later. Right now, we're focused on you guys and you guys alone. If given this opportunity, what would be the dream? Well, I guess either what words? Either Forward Instinct, Lone Pine Media, Bobby, Danny. What would be the dream project for you guys?
Hmm. That's an interesting one. Oh, Bobby, I'll let you go first.
Well, I mean, my focus has always been on character focused storytelling,
Okay.
whether it's in game design or animation or live action or illustration or painting or my interest is mainly in the articulation of character to an audience.
Mm-hmm.
So dream scenario, I mean, I would love to make a mini series. I would love to make a feature film. I would love to do that.
Okay.
So that would probably be mine. I'm always, just as Dan's always got these game ideas, I've always got these screenplays that I'm writing and storyboarding out and working on getting crews together. So that would be my I guess my dream would be to be able to create some type of narrative that folks engage with.
I would say, is there a particular story or a particular group of characters that, if given this opportunity, would be the first one you'd want to tackle?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's like you want to make one so you can get to the other, and the one on the top of the pile is a feature film I wrote
Okay.
A year or so back that I think has a pretty high potential to be enjoyed by a group of folks. That would be a live action piece. Past that, I have an animated miniseries I've written a couple of episodes for.
Okay.
Past that, I have a noir detective kind of surrealist horror series I wrote some pieces for, and a book and everything. So, but yeah, I think that feature film would be my stop number one on that train.
Okay. Okay. I mean, especially seeing some of the stuff you've been able to put out, whether it's personally or we're working with Forward Instinct. Like, I'm certainly intrigued to see what you're going to present with that. And also, if you need an actor or a voice actor or whatnot, I am based close to Athens, Georgia, so I'm at least in good proximity.
That's true. That's true. You're around the corner.
Exactly. Daniel, what about yourself?
Yeah, well, Bobby is a great person to be in touch with for, voice acting opportunities and stuff. So yeah, definitely keep him in mind.
Oh, absolutely.
There's I think a few different directions really that I could go with like a next project, and that could be ballooned into something large, or is already like a large idea that I could try to tackle. And I don't know. I've done a lot of what you're talking about, actually, of going and pitching to different companies that were interested in Keepsake County and stuff. And unfortunately, it didn't work out. But, a lot of productive discussions with some very large cheese wheels, so to speak.
Okay.
And kind of like learning what goes into making the hot dog there as well. And, a lot of it comes down to like publisher need and stuff. And so that's kind of maybe how I would narrow it down. But if I just had to pick something, I like making stuff regularly and fast, and Keepsake County took like, we're coming up on almost 5 years,
Right.
Of making this game. And for me, it's just like, I've just wanted to get this out the door, and have it in like good shape and have it out. And, that's why I haven't given up on it, is because it has so much potential. Right. But, I have like Broke Signal Badlands that I'm going to be wrapping up and putting out this year. That's like almost done.
Yeah.
And, that got into like Rock, Paper, Shotgun last month, which was a really nice surprise. And, that game took like maybe 2.5 months.
Okay.
And I like how that sounds to me as a creator of like, have your big project, but also put out like a few games a year. I like that, just as not from like a business perspective, although it is, nice for that probably, but as just like an artist who is looking at what he makes as his main medium.
Right.
I think that making games can be like really hard in that kind of aspect of both saying something personal and kind of speaking to like your mindset when you're making it, because, I'm not who I was 5 years ago. Right. And Bobby isn't who he was 5 years ago either. But we're stuck working on this thing. Yeah. But we're stuck working on this thing from 5 years ago. And it's like, are we outgrowing the art that we're making? Right. Is it saying who we are now when we put this out, or our headspace, and how much have we had to change it as we work on it to reflect that? And so that's kind of the beauty of working on smaller, shorter stuff, is that you can be like, yeah, this is me now. This is where my headspace is at and stuff. And that's, I think, probably what I would do is I would take, some kind of money like that, and I'd just be like, all right, let's go make like 5 games.
There you go.
So, yeah.
I mean, you did say you have like at least 5 or 6 ideas floating around, so like being able to just knock those out real quickly, I mean, that's not going to hurt.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when you have something in your head, you don't know how it works until you throw it on paper.
True.
Yeah. And we have, I'm a perennial game jammer at this point. So like, there's Keepsake County, which I've worked on the team with, and there's Demon, Chosen Few, and Midnight Ultra, which were all like kind of like team games. But then I have like Midnight Taco, Villain Vegan, Brain Plastic Signals, Pansion is Frustrated,
Right.
Broke Signal Badlands. These are all things that I worked on by myself. And so it's kind of like, I could take all of these and try to like clean them up some and add some new stuff and put them out. And then I have other stuff that, you know, I've been writing design talks for and stuff that I might want to work on. So I don't know. And I don't like marrying myself to a future idea if I want to change direction.
I get where you come from. I mean, I was gonna say I went to school for filmmaking or mass media and stuff. You know, film, TV, all that jazz or whatnot. So I get that kind of like, you have like the projects that you work like a long time on, but also like you have the ideas that you kind of just want to toss out there, just see how it's done or whatnot. There have been films that I've done in 48 hours because that was the parameters I was given or whatnot. Or it's like,
I did one of those last year.
Exactly. I was gonna say I went. I don't know if you're aware, but I went to school at Valdosta State University, and every year they have like a 48-hour film festival for their film department and whatnot. So that's how I was able to just do that just for the fun of it more than anything else. And I also get the experience of actually working in film, because especially whenever I first went to Valdosta State, I didn't even know I was going to be like working in filmmaking. I thought I was going to be working like sports broadcasting or whatnot. And then I realized, oh, wait, I can work in film. Oh.
Yeah.
But sadly, we got to get down from the dream scenario. We got to get back to reality. And I'll ask the ever so generic question. Where do you guys hope to see yourselves in, say, 5 to 10 years from now?
Doing this for a living.
That's a good start. That's a good start.
Yeah. That's honestly just about it for me.
Valid. What about yourself, Bob? Same thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think all of us would be like, doing anything for a living would be the goal right now.
That's a very good start.
Yeah, I think for me, the whole reason I created Lone Pine as a studio was to kind of slowly build that as a place for all of these creators that I've worked with and collaborated with that have really great ideas and really high talents that might not be a part of a studio, or might be a part of something that's almost too built up, too big to really showcase that. So being able to grow Lone Pine into a studio that's able to help people who have really good ideas put them out independently and see if any of those seeds start to grow. Being able to kind of showcase that and put some of my ideas out there through that studio would be the goal. I mean, aside from that, I just got married this past year, so in 5 years, I'm hoping we start the family situation. So
that'd be nice.
I'm hoping in 5 years we got a little dude wearing a polka dot tie.
There you go. That's a good thing to aspire for. Also, I was gonna ask this a little bit sooner, but Lone Pine Media or whatnot.
Yes.
Is that a Back to the Future reference, or is there a different, or is there a different reason why you named it that?
There's a different reason.
Okay.
I totally Back to the Future is great. I love Back to the Future. But I completely forgot that was a thing. You're the second person who's brought it up to me.
Really?
And I went, oh yeah, that is a Back to the Future thing. No, Lone Pine is part of what my last name means.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I love the idea of the imagery of it as well. This kind of this isolated pine tree, this thing that's like a sturdy individual piece, and the idea of like every project that we make is a lone pine. It's something that stands on its own and has this kind of space around it to showcase what it is as an individual tree.
Okay.
And kind of thinking of ideas as seeds you plant and hope that they grow into something, combined with just what my last name means. So it's got that personal touch. But yeah, Back to the Future, sure.
It's a nice little. I mean, we could add that into the lore. I mean, why not?
Yeah, sure. If you like that, yeah, go ahead.
And since I am on this topic, real quickly, Danny, what about Forward Instinct? Why was that the name you guys went with for your studio?
A lot of hemming and hawing, to be honest, and figuring out what we were kind of gonna name ourselves. And I do a lot of like UX UI design and like branding and stuff, and that's what I was doing full time for a while. And as far as branding goes, kind of the thing that you want to have is something that is sort of timeless and a little bit like ephemeral, and you don't want to get nailed down to an idea that you're like stuck with forever. And so for Forward Instinct, it was kind of like speaking to like the modus operandi of the studio of always trying to be sort of future pushing, kind of like avant-garde, bleeding edge and stuff. And while I don't think we're always, perfectly idealizing that, I do think it does sort of speak to kind of the spirit of what we make. So, yeah.
Well, there you go. There you go. As we start to wind down the interview, I just have one last question I want to ask you guys. Obviously, you both are deeply entrenched in art in one way or another. The different aspects you've had, both in different fields, also with Keepsake County and the games you guys are developing together, is a clear testament of that. How important is art, not just for you, but for the world as a whole?
I mean, very. It's kind of the reason that you do anything, you take the time off to go see a movie. You get excited about a game release. You read a book, and then you share the ideas that you read in that book with the people you know. So it's kind of like we're here for each other, and we're here for the art, and the art is just like a way that we communicate with each other. So in a way, it all kind of gets blended into that nice little pot. So that's, I don't know. To me, it's kind of a more just kind of simple, holistic answer, I guess.
Fair enough. And how about yourself, Bobby?
Yeah, I think that was well said. I think that how important is art? I think it's the way that we can share ourselves when we don't have the words or actions.
Yeah, there you go. That's good.
I think that's it's not just essential, but it's automatic. Whether you have the skill or the technical ability or any of that, it doesn't matter. Everyone creates things, whether it's a doodle on a piece of paper, whether it's a song they hum or whistle, whether it's a child they're raising. Everyone kind of naturally has this automatic impulse to create and share and pass down ideas. So importance to me, I don't know, that almost implies that there's an option not to have it. I think it's a automatic and essential part of being alive.
I think that is amazingly worded, if I do say so myself. I mean, I've asked that question close to a couple hundred times at this point for all sorts of different people. And I think that's the first time someone has ever responded with it being automatic, not just essential. So,
well, yeah,
it's a good way of wording
that's what
it.
I think. Thank you.
That is all
good.
Yeah, it's great. I would say that's all the questions I have for you guys. I've already showered you both with a whole bunch of praise, but I'm gonna shower you with a little bit more.
Keep it coming.
I was gonna say I'm gonna do a little bit more because it's my podcast. I do what the fuck I want.
Well, thank you for having us on this podcast. Appreciate it.
Well, I was gonna say, thank you guys for taking the time to be here first and foremost. I mean, like I said, whenever I first saw Keepsake County at MomoCon, like I instantly fell in love with it. Like just the art style of it, the possibility for how insane it could absolutely be. Like it made me excited for a cool. It made me excited. Like that's the long and the short of it. And especially whenever I gave you guys my business card and you guys reached out and really wanted to be on this podcast, it made me even more excited. So getting the chance to really dive into your guys' stuff, seeing what you had a chance to work on, what you guys have been able to develop for yourselves or whatnot, like it's absolutely fantastic to see the love and creativity that you guys have for what you're doing. It's incredible to hear your guys' story and how you've kind of built yourselves up to this point, like with the experiences beforehand. It's been a absolute pleasure to have you guys here to talk about this, and I sincerely hope that if not my excitement and if not for your guys' story, that if people should take the time to explore your stuff, not just Keepsake County, but Midnight Ultra, the Demon if they can or whatnot, but like all of your guys' stuff as a whole. Like you guys are putting out some incredible stuff no matter what, and Keepsake County is hopefully a good punctuation point to that whenever they get a chance to play it, whether they want to play the early beta right now or if they want to wait until it releases early next year. Like it makes me excited to see what's going to happen for you guys as well, because I can tell that once people get their hands on this, it's going to be an absolute blast and people are going to absolutely love and enjoy it. And I And once again, it makes me excited to see what you guys are going to be doing next, because I'm going to be rooting for you guys every single step of the way, no matter what you guys do. Long and short of it,
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Long and short of it, thank you guys for what you do. Keep up the incredible work. And like I said, I will be by your side, rooting for y'all every single step of the way. Thank you.
Appreciate you, man.
No,
Yeah, much appreciated. Thank you.
Oh, no, absolutely. Now, if people want to see why exactly I've been gushing about you guys for the past hour to however long it's been at this point, go ahead and plug yourselves for the people at home.
Yeah, Forward Instinct on Twitter, Instagram. We have a Facebook account, but TikTok, YouTube. I mean, pretty much any platform. If you search Forward Instinct, we're there. So that's the place to look.
And I'm Robert 4RD, third, but with a 4, Ford, on Instagram. And you can look up Lone Pine Media's work online and check out my website, bobbymatsudaira.com, for some of the other projects I'm working on. And yeah.
Oh, and the Forward Instinct itch.io and Steam pages. Yeah, definitely look at our itch.io, because I put all of our Game Jam projects on there like immediately.
Yep. I was definitely gonna do the itch.io, and I assume on Steam. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is there like a pre-order link or something like that at this point for Keepsake County?
There's a wishlist page, so you can definitely wishlist you can wishlist our games there, and we do have like a developer page. I do post reviews of games on there, if that's something you care about. Yeah.
Well, there you go. I'll be sure to have those links and any that you may have listed down in the description below, so that I got y'all covered. Do you guys have any final words before we sign off?
Thanks for having us, and thanks for listening.
Absolutely. Bobby, any final words?
Don't steal my stuff after you play our game.
And with that, all I've left to say is, for the people at home, hey, where's my watch? No. For the people at home, if you can, pay your artists.
I'll take it.
Yeah, pay your artists.
Tell me what's wrong, tell me it's parts in motion. Sing me a song, tell me your eyes can go open. Show me it all, pick me up in the car you drove when you used to call. Show me it all.
Thank you so much for sticking around to the end. If this is your first time listening, I genuinely do appreciate it. Like I said, whenever I first encountered these guys at MomoCon, Daniel and Bobby, I was just absolutely blown away with what they had to show. So it was a true treat and a pleasure to get to sit down with them and talk about this. Daniel, Bobby, if you guys have gotten up to this point, thank you guys sincerely for your time. And thank you guys for creating such a fun experience. I know I'm extremely excited to see how this game turns out, and it just makes me excited in general to see what you guys are going to be doing past this game. Having a conversation like this one today, and especially with a form of art that I don't really represent on this podcast enough, it makes me excited to learn more about different backstories and different forms of art. I try hard to provide you guys with a good variety of different forms of art, different forms of media, really trying to get your guys' try to include everyone in the art fields. That's the thing I've always championed at the end of the day. And I can't even remember off the top of my head the last time I had a indie game developer on this podcast. So it's a real pleasure to get the guys from Forward Instinct and Lone Pine Media on here to talk about their stuff, because this is the kind of stuff I'm always intrigued about and excited about, learning kind of the behind the scenes, the inspiration, why they wanted to go a certain way with this kind of stuff. It makes me excited to talk to more guys and experience different forms of art. Like, I know with this podcast, we've already explored a ton of different art forms. I mean, I could just run off a little bit off the top of my head with, animation, thumbnails, music, video games, wrestling, like all sorts of different forms of art. But I feel like I've only really scratched the surface sometimes when it comes to what's possible with art, what people are able to do to express themselves when it comes to art. And so getting to talk to guys in a field that I don't really get to expose a lot on the podcast is something that really excites me. That's why I was more than happy to talk with Daniel and Bobby more than anything else. Like, it's really cool, especially with what they were presenting, with what they got going on. Like, it's so... It always blows my mind, especially not just the form of art themselves, but how well they're able to execute it. It just makes me more and more excited to explore what's out there, and more excited to present you guys with all these different forms of art and to really showcase what's out there. Really let you guys know, hey, this is the kind of art that's out there. This is the way that people are able to express themselves. It leaves me further curious, and I think that's a good driving force for this podcast. Just the curiosity that I have for artists and why they chose their form of art, as well as the love and support you guys continue to give, not just to myself, but to the guests I bring on the podcast. And genuinely from the bottom of my heart, thank you. Thank you for that love. Thank you for that support. And let's keep on going as we explore more of the art world, as we showcase what's out there in the art world. Because, like I said, I feel like we've only scratched the surface.